everyone, and welcome to this eTwinning online seminar on making historical thinking explicit to students using online tools. And part 2, so this is the continuation to the earlier seminar we had with Euroclio. And here's some instructions for the participants. Unfortunately, we cannot give you the microphone, so if you have any questions to the participants, just you can type the questions in the chat box and we can answer them from there. And here's just some instructions for raising hand or speak louder or softer or agree or disagree that you can use during the webinar.
Several people in the chat are asking for a higher volume. Is it possible?
Volume for me, yes, for me it's possible, but I won't be. If you have any issues with the sound, just you can exit the room and come back again, and we always recommend using the headsets. And if this doesn't work, then just leave the session and come back again. We are recording this webinar, so you will be able to watch it again on YouTube sometime during this week. And we will also send you certificates this week as well. So for the speakers for today, we have Steven Steggers, who's the Acting Executive Director of Euroclio, which is the European Association of History Educators. And then for the other speaker, we have Helen Nelson, who's the leader of the Historiana teaching and learning team. So now I can give it to Steven if you want to share your screen or if you have any slides that you would like to share. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. You're mute at the moment.
Okay. And can you see the video?
No, we cannot see it. Are you sharing your screen?
No, I was just, I thought that the video with the webcam because you said it was always nice to see.
Okay, yeah, we can see. Okay, we can see you, yes, if that's what you mean. Okay. Hello, hi.
It would be nice actually to also see the participants.
Yeah,
But thank you.
yeah, unfortunately not possible. Yes, it would be nice. So if you have any slides or do you want to share your screen, you can do it, yes.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, so many of us, it's 120, that's quite many of you. Okay. So.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for joining this meeting. My name is Steven. I'm the Acting Executive Director of Euroclio, and I'm very happy to work there now already for 12 years. A lot of that time I actually spend on developing Historiana. Historiana is an initiative of Euroclio and Webtic, and we are working together with our members to see how we can make most out of the new technologies to promote good history education. And I'm very happy that Helen is here to join to show also how this can be done in practice. She's one of our most experienced teacher trainers, and she has been leading the development of Historiana in terms of historical thinking. So, and at the moment there are lots of resources available on Historiana, but the thing that we will be talking most about is the e-activity builder. I know that some of you are actually joining again. You have been joining the previous session, so I would also like to draw your attention to some of the new features and new contents that we have since the last time we were there. So if you look actually at the historical content part of Historiana, you see that there are also lots of resources about historical content. So here you can see in the key moments, for example, like the First World War. Here you can see a lot of information about, for example, how the war was fought. And if you want to update your knowledge about the history, we really made like a huge effort to select some of the sources. We work together with people from different countries. So if you click um, through these source collections, it's a very good way of like getting up to speed, to refresh your historical knowledge, but also to get lots of sources from different countries, always translated into English. I know that is not ideal because you want to have more materials, more languages, but at least I think it helps to reduce the language barrier. So I really recommend you to also have a look there. So that was specifically for the people who have been joining before. So you can go there by going to historical content. And then especially the key moments. You can see we have lots of material on the First World War, the Second World War, but also the Cold War. And one of the things that we'll be working on is to uh, make it easier to use the sources from the source collections here, also in the e-activity builder. But today we're going to do active work, and because of that, I won't like to go give as soon as possible the word to Helen. But in the meantime, I'll give you some steps that explain you how to create your own account at Historiana. So you can just go to historiana.eu. So I'll also put it in the chat. So if you take a browser, it's recommended to use Google Chrome. We try to optimize it for others also. But at the moment, Google Chrome has the best experience. And then on the top here with login or register, you can click. And then you say have these questions. You do not have an account? Question mark, please register here. Or if you forgot your login or passport, you can reset your passport word. So now we're going to like register because we're new. So you can just put in like your name and then your email. So registering is free. And it will always remain free. We really believe that things should be accessible for all students and for all teachers. So it will, so no worries about that. And then just make your, make a password. So you go first to click on login, then you click on the register because you haven't registered yet. If you have an account, just use your credentials and then you can like register. Once you've done that, you can see that there's also like a My Historiana environment. And again, because there are some new people, I will explain a little bit more than I did the last time. If you go to the teaching and learning section, and there you have some e-learning activities, you can see that we have some ready-made e-learning activities. It's very easy to add them. You can just click on the plus button and then you say yes. So that goes for any of these. So if you would, for example, search on war, you can see several activities that we have related to that. So this is another one that I like. And then if you go to My Historiana, you can see that under My Learning Activities, you have them. And then you can adapt them further. So at the moment, we have a small number of e-learning activities, but of course, in the future, this will grow. I will also show you some of the sources that you can add, because especially if you start to play around with Historiana, we found it's very useful if you have some sources already. For that, you can just go to the historical content section and select source collections. And there you can find several source collections. So here is one. And there, if you want to add sources from here, again, you can just click on the plus and add some sources. So, and again, you can see here within My Historiana now there added to my sources. And after that, you can edit them. So you own them in a way. So I guess that is probably the shortest introduction that I could give. So Helen, I took 10 minutes from your time. But now I would really like to give the word to you, and so that you can show how to make good learning activities with them.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I will just take back control. That's the slogan we really shouldn't be using in the UK. And while I'm doing that, hopefully Stephen's releasing control at the other end. I will just say hello formally, and I'm sure I've probably met some of you. As Stephen said, I help with the Historiana learning activities in particular, and work on various projects with Euroclio. And when I'm not doing that, then I'm based in York, up in the far north, compared to where most of you seem to be based. And I spend my time with history education with the UK Historical Association and training history teachers in the UK. So what I want to do, as I say, I'm still hoping, Stephen, can you give back control on the so that I can put my screen up? So, because I just want to transfer it to my screen. Can you hear me, Stephen? Okay, Stephen. I need you to give back control of the screen. Okay, here we go. It's happening. It's just being a little steady, but we are getting there. Okay, if I now press share my screen, that should work. Okay, so you can all see my screen here, and what I will do as I'm going through some examples of e-learning activities with some historical thinking behind them is actually also go over again some of those steps that Stephen was talking about in relation to the e-activity builder, because if you're like me, then it's all right being told once, but you could do with being told 2 or 3 or 4 times sometimes exactly which steps to take. I have to say it is very user friendly, and I do say that as somebody that doesn't find technology the most obvious thing to use. So I hope you will find it easy as well. Our encouragement would definitely be get in, make yourself an account, and then play around. You can't do any damage or harm to it. You can only create things that you then have to delete later. Okay, so I am, you can see my screen, I hope all of you, I am connected in as eTwinning at historiana.eu for the purposes of today, and my Historiana looks like this. If I go to historical content, exactly the same as Stephen was showing you earlier, you can see the various units, key moments that are available, and there are some absolutely splendid things to have a look through there, particularly some really rich source collections from Europeana. This one, for example, on expressions of power and status by European royalty, has got some absolutely excellent things for looking at visual sources. Teaching and learning, likewise, would look exactly the same as for you. And in here you can find different learning activities, most of them connected through to different contexts, some of them standing alone. If you actually want to search sources and you don't want to upload from your computer, then there are so many partners now, very exciting for history teachers, that you can get directly into. For example, the Imperial War Museum is the largest repository of collections from the early 20th century, from the First World War particularly. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the e-activity builder. And when you go into the e-activity builder, you get a blank screen. Now, you might have noticed, those of you that were sharp-eyed there, that actually my screen wasn't blank because I'd been doing something else beforehand. Simply refresh to get a blank screen. Your refresh button at the top of the screen. Reload this page, refresh this page, and that is always a way that you can go back to having a completely blank canvas. So let me show you around a few things here. You have various what we're calling building blocks for creating activities, and you can simply drag and drop, click the pen to edit, I'm going back, click to delete. So I'll just go through that very simple step again. Pop something into the working panel. Oh, I didn't want that. I'll delete it immediately. Oh, I do want to work on that. Back to Builder at the top. Stick another one in. Back to Builder. Text. So it's very, very simple procedure. I'm just going to get rid of all of those now. So I'm just simply showing you, for those of you that have never seen this before, those very simple steps. So all the time you can discard, delete, you can drop things in, take them out. You can have 2 of those if you wish. The only limitation is that once you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you have to start making decisions as to which one to get rid of, or whether or to start a part 2 learning activity. What you can do here is upload a picture. Now this uploads actually directly from your pictures. So imagine, there we are, keep calm and enjoy your NQT year. That would apply to my students here. So you can upload a picture which is just rather nice for a frontage. You can give an activity a title. You might want to give that a title which you can clearly recognize in a list of things on your computer, or you might want to make it a question for your students. Likewise here, you can describe your e-learning activity. That might be a description for your students. It might be a description for yourself and your colleagues. So you might want to just put source activity on World War I, so that when you are looking for it, you think, ah, yes, that's what that was. And then you can build your activity. If you want to see what the students can see at any point in time, just click Show Student View. And at the moment, nothing is coming up there, obviously, because I haven't created anything. Okay, we have a lovely program in the UK called Blue Peter, and they have a strapline, which is here's one I did earlier. I'm actually going to just delete that one. But here are some I did earlier. So I've started creating this e-learning activity because, remember, refresh, if in doubt, refresh, because I thought it would be nice for you to see an activity being created. So my question, how familiar would you have found life 100 years ago? I'm thinking of designing an activity for my students to encourage them to engage with what we would call a sense of period. So that is getting a sense of what the world was like 100 years ago. And so I imagine that if I was doing this with my students, I would set up a number of activities based around pictures. So I've done one here, or at least I've started to do it so that you can see the process. Now I'm not actually going to bother uploading an image right now. That's a very straightforward thing. But I've decided my question, my inquiry question, how familiar would you have found life 100 years ago? And I'm going to put building a sense of period, and I'm going to put women at work in World War I. So I could make lots of these. I could have one that was called building a sense of period, a street in Paris in 1912. I could have building a sense of period, the country bringing the harvest in Greece in 1919, whatever images I could find. But here's one that I've already decided. So I've started my text. I've said, study the picture very carefully. In fact, look at it for a whole 2 minutes without pausing or talking. Some students are already going to get lost. I need to improve this. Study the picture on the next screen very carefully. Now click Next. So I'm not going to let any student get stuck. You can see my original question is here, and if I'd put an image, it would be here. So if I click Next, I've already loaded this lovely image. If I tick Previous, I go back. Now when you're building yourself, you can break in this way. So if I click on Edit, I go into that second image. Now I have deliberately chosen to load something into the analyzing tool. I'll just show you how that you do that with another one. So Edit, that's what it looks like when you get a new one. Select a source. If I go into, this has jumped straight into my Historiana sources. Which one would I like to choose? I could choose that one. Click the pink circle, top, left, add to tool, and there we are. It's added. Okay, back to Builder. I'm actually going to get rid of that one for a moment, because what I want them to do is have a really, really close look at this particular picture. I love this. The more you look at it, the more you can see. All sorts of machinery down here. And you might remember that my first task was simply for them to just look at it. How many times do students really look carefully at something? And yet if you speak to any art historian, they'll tell you that they spend hours just looking very carefully. Okay, once they've looked at it, in fact, I will go back a moment. Once they've looked at it, now click Next. They look at it, and then they click on the next screen. So here I'm going to put identifying the familiar and the unfamiliar. Quite straightforward. On the next screen, you will see the image again. This time, annotate it to identify parts of life that would be familiar to you. Sorry, that are familiar to you today. Also, annotate parts that seem strange to us today. That's unfamiliar. Annotate F for familiar and U for unfamiliar. Okay, so I'm setting this up. I then go back to my builder. I can then go into the analyzing tool again. I've then got a blank thing. I select the source. It goes straight to my sources. I click on the pink, remember. I then add it to the tool. There it is. And I can do one for them. Let's think. Oops, drag my annotation. Come on, annotation, here we go. Oh, it was doing this for me earlier on. There we go. Right. Headphones. There you get an F. I see loads of those on the way to school on the train. Let's have a look. Electric lighting. Actually, that gets an F as well. Seen some of those in my school. Now this is interesting. Is this familiar or unfamiliar? Old-fashioned telegraph. I think that's unfamiliar. Okay, and oops, don't cancel it. My screen. Add. You get the idea. And so students can go through and look at all the familiar or unfamiliar things. And then what I would be doing is asking students in pairs to look at a different image each, and then final prepare for discussion, review your work, and prepare to give your view about the key question. Which is this one above? If you've given the students different images to look at, then hopefully you're building up a really good sense of what's familiar and what's unfamiliar. Now, of course, it very much depends on what technology is available to you. If you're getting them to do this as a homework because you haven't got technology available to you in the classroom, then you could ask them to write 2 columns of what's familiar and unfamiliar and bring it into class. If at the other extreme you've got the sort of classroom where you can show different people's screens on the board at the front of the class, then of course you can show the image that the students are talking about while they're feeding back, which then means that everybody gets to see what everybody else has seen. Okay, so that would be an example of how you could use the builder for sense of period. Let me show you another one. Now, those of you that have been here before have seen this one already, but vast majority of people haven't. And let's have a look at how can a portrait express power. So again, here's one I've done earlier. Simple question, how can a portrait express power? Students, at this time I've addressed the student. Here you can practice what we were doing in lesson about studying sources carefully. So this is an example of something that they could use as follow-up work to work that you've done in class. In this case, studying sources very carefully again, but for a slightly different purpose. So my question, actually here twice, on the next screen you'll find a portrait of a European monarch. Annotate the portrait to show all the ways that power is displayed in the image. Now go to the next screen. Actually, what I'm just going to do is student view for this. No, that's not going to play for me today. So I will go into it this way. Next, I've loaded up this rather splendid portrait of Napoleon, which I'm sure you recognise. Napoleon with an emperor complex, if ever there was one. And they can then annotate the portrait to show all the way that power is expressed in the image. And of course there are so many ways that power is expressed in that image. Absolutely extraordinary. From the rich clothing to the laurel wreath up here that they could annotate, to the imperial eagle. Absolutely stuff full of symbols of power used by monarchs before Napoleon. The man had a great sense of his place in history. Even that stamps, even the full face forward is full on Charlemagne, different from the way that Louis XVI used to present himself. So they can identify all the areas of power. I've then used a different tool. This is the embed tool. And what I've done here, or what I would do here, is put in here something like YouTube clip about this portrait. Because, for example, that's such a famous portrait, I know where I can go to get a really good YouTube clip where an art historian will talk them through the imagery. I can then simply embed the code down here, and that means, or I can put an external website here, and that means that students will then move on from here to actually finding out some more about this particular image. thinking about the task, then now you have annotated the portrait, select 3 annotations that you wish to write about. So they have annotated a portrait, they've heard a little bit more about it, they can then choose their favourite annotations, and then how can a portrait express power? Now the reason for using the yellow, the question, looks exactly the same as the text, but the difference is that once you share this with students, they can write in this box here. So students cannot write with a text box, only you can do that in the preparation stage. But for questions, they can now write a paragraph. So hopefully that would be a follow-up to some work that they'd done, and I could see if they were developing their skills to use sources as evidence. Let's have a look at another one. Something about historical significance here. And again, I'll show you different tools. Remember, refresh is always the answer at the top. So here I've got what was the most significant impact on the history of medicine. And if I go into the text, here I have set up a revision activity, revising World War I, medicine in World War I. On the next screen, you will find 3 images. You could resize them to show which had the most significant impact on the history of medicine. You will need to look back to your class notes and discuss this with a friend. Be prepared to justify your choice with evidence in 10 minutes' time. So off they go to the next screen. Okay, we haven't seen this screen before, so let's spend a little bit of time with it. This is our sorting tool. If I just slot in another one there, click on edit, you can see that you have a choice of different backgrounds. I could choose a plain background. I could choose a line. That might be useful if you were looking for positive and negative, or if you were wanting them to actually arrange matters in some sort of chronological order. You could develop some sort of living graph here. So it could be the economy of Europe in the 1920s and 30s, and we could have ups and downs, and they could express that. This one, you could put an image in the center, and this could show relationship, distant relationship, closer relationship. Here is another background that would lend itself to developing things in chronological order. So for example, if I had, let's stick with World War I, if I had the 1914 outbreak of world conflict in the summer of 1914, I could get them to space correctly the different causes. And lo and behold, I'm sure you can imagine, they would find that there'd be lots of causes here, and then causes would be less frequent. Certainly works very nicely, this sort of sorting with something like the events of the French Revolution. I think students can sometimes forget the gaps, and it's a very interesting activity to present onto a sequenced diagram the actual events, and you could have images that represented each event, and lo and behold they'll find there's a whole cluster in the summer of 1789, a cluster in the autumn of 1789, and then it actually goes rather quiet for a while. And that itself, of course, is very important to their understanding, their chronological understanding, to understand that things do not happen at equal spaced times, and also even at times of great change there are often lulls in the action. Another background here, this would be excellent for familiar, unfamiliar, or positive, negative, essentially 2 columns. You might like to put an image in here and then put typed material that you load for people to actually identify different parts of sources, what they can see, and then what they can infer, or perhaps what they can see in a source, and then what would connect to their own knowledge. So you've got lots of different choices of backgrounds there, very clearly a graph which you could use as a living graph. Overlap here, where you've got commonality. Even more complex one there. So you get the idea of the different sources. If I just go back to my builder, I shall just, whoops, wrong one. I shall just get rid of that for a moment. It's disappeared a lot of it, never mind. Hopefully, just go back. Might not have. Let's go. Okay, no, it's not playing today. It's removed everything. But if I was looking at what was the most significant impact, I would get them to choose into the sorting image. I could put a blank background, get them to add some sources. So let's have, just let me go back 1 second. Significant impact on the history of medicine. Yeah, okay, so I might pick plastic surgery. I might pick physiotherapy. And I might pick, yes, women working in the medical profession. No, I'll go for reintegration into work life. So they've got to make a decision as to which sources they choose. They choose their favourite 3, and then they have to decide most significant impact on medicine. Was it to do with reintegrating people, so things to do with occupational therapy, as we would call it in the UK today, enabling very disabled people to enter life again? Or was it reconstruction of people's faces? Extraordinary work that went on there, which led to great advances. Or was it very specifically impersonal movement, what we now call physiotherapy? Okay, so I've chosen those 3. If I then go back to my builder, having sorted them, I could put them into a prioritizing tool. And if I add the same sources, rise of plastic surgery, use of physiotherapy, reintegration into world life, keep noticing what I'm doing all the time, make them pink, add them to the tool, then I could do my deciding. I think that plastic surgery was the most important. I think reintegration into life, I'm going to say that didn't come till the Second World War much. Controversial. I think the advances in plastic surgery, me and my friend in my class, we've decided we can argue that that was the most important, that was the least important, and that was the middle one, advances in physiotherapy. So we're set to argue. And you can go round as a teacher in the class and you can see at a glance what their opinions are, and that will then help you to direct the discussion, because you can say, Nicola and Rodrigo, you decided that plastic surgery was the most important. Give us your justification. Susanna and Julia, you decided that it was reintegration into the workplace. Argue against them. So you can use it also as a classroom management technique. There are all sorts of ways that you can use this. Look back your class notes, discuss with a friend is a way of getting them to do some thinking with work that they've already done. Okay, let's have a look at another one. How are we doing for time? I'm sure somebody's going to intervene if they need me to shut up at some point or want me to do slightly different things. Okay, let's have a look at this one. What work did European women do? I'm going to refresh again to clear that. What work did European women do in World War I? And I've just put this time for use with class 3, so that's just an example of something that is a reminder. This time, here's my title at the top as well. On the next screen, you will find images of women at work in World War I from various parts of Europe, sort them into two categories. Work that was still fulfilling the traditional role of women, 1914 to 18, put these on the left-hand side. Work that was beyond the traditional role of women at the time, put these on the right-hand side. So here we go. We have various images of women. Click to make them larger. Women being used as propaganda, but still very much family propaganda. Oh gosh, I've forgotten. What did I say? What did she say? I've got to put traditional role on the left-hand side. So I'll move her over there. Women working as doctors in a women's military hospital. Blimey, that's unusual. That's not the typical role of women then at the time. Women serving in the Red Cross. Well, women had been nurses, and they're still quite formally dressed, but yeah, it's not as traditional as the family role, so maybe I'm going to subvert the system and put that one a little bit to the right. Again, women serving as nurses this time, but very much out there with men. It's a bit unusual. Okay. Women working in factories, gosh, that's very unusual. And you can see that we can, and here's another one, women serving as frontline soldiers. My goodness, that was unusual, very unusual, and only happened in certain armies. There is a woman that lives just up the road from here who couldn't fight in the British Army, went to Serbia to work with the Red Cross and ended up high up in the Serbian army. I don't know whether our Serbian colleagues know the word Flora Sands, but she and I turn out to have been born in the same village, which is quite strange, really. I only learnt that a few weeks back. Okay, so that would be an example of sorting things out, and then you could add the next task for them to do, and then we could have a question for them to answer, and we could add some more sources for them to look at. You get the idea about how you can build and build. Now, at the moment, as you can see, we have got a text tool, building block, which is where you give instructions. A question building block, which is something you can put in wherever you want students to actually be able to write anything. An embedding tool, just to remind you, because I've only seen that one once, that's where you can get them to watch something or look at a website rather than just set them off into the internet on their own and never find them again. And a tool for analysing sources, where you can select and put things in and they can then annotate. A tool for prioritising, so anything you can think of where prioritising would be useful. And a tool for sorting. And we would be very interested to know what you would like to have as our next tools, because as everything in this world, things get developed when the money becomes available, and when Stephen can work his magic and get project money, then it would be possible to develop another tool. And that will essentially then slot in here, and so that the activity builder will become more complex. But what I think is very exciting about this is that you really can make it as simple or as complex as you want. You can use it in class, or you can use it for homework for students, depending what's appropriate to your context. And whereas so much that's provided out there either costs you or is not very high quality historical thinking. I mean, everybody likes a good quiz, but to be honest, it's sometimes quicker to do it on paper. This is actually enabling history teachers to build up historical thinking using the knowledge that their students have. So I would tend to say that most uses of this e-learning activity will either come at the very beginning of a topic where you want them to get hooked in by looking at a particularly interesting piece of source material, be it a portrait from the time or an outrageous quote by a historian. Or, and I think this is probably more likely, it will be for the follow-up work. So they've used their textbook in class, they've got a lot of knowledge, they know their stuff, but are they using it historically? Are they really able to apply what they've learned to comment on a piece of source material or to comment on an interpretation? Are they able to put together their own arguments about the relative importance of the different roles of causes? And you can play around with this, and that's very much what I would encourage you to do, is to play around with this and decide what you want to do it for yourself. And in My Historiana will always be stored your e-learning activities, your sources, they will sit there and stay there. I haven't got any tags, profile, and any shares that you've done, including with your class. And I'm going to leave Stephen to have a chat through about how you can do the sharing with your class and what stage that is at. So just to recap, the new Historiana site, press on the H and you get the home button, has so many different aspects to it now. That's our home screen. Always worth scrolling down. I've learned this about websites. Scroll down, so much more helpful than the search function sometimes. So we've got a blog where you'll find different learning strategies. Here we are, the testing new features. You can fill in a questionnaire at any time and tell us what you think you'd like us to develop next. But then we have the specific tabs of teaching and learning, historical content, which is the same for everybody, e-activity builder, which is the basic builder. You can build an e-activity without logging in, it's just it won't save. And then the My Historiana is the point where it's yours. And of course, what's absolutely lovely is you don't have to do all this in English. You can do it in whatever language you choose, and so that your students can access it. And that, I think, is very exciting, because as Stephen said earlier, inevitably at this stage, I'm afraid, with the limited resources to try and get an international language that more people can understand than not, the actual main parts of the site are in English. But My Historiana is your Historiana, so it can be in any language you like, and of course you can do bits of translation of things and then keep them in My Historiana, so that you can then add to the e-learning activities for your students. So at that point, I'm going to try and work out how to hand back the screen to Stephen, who is going to guide you through the last part, I hope. And I do apologise that I don't have a video, I'm afraid. I'm sitting at my office at the university in York, and I just don't have a video on this machine. So I'm sorry I've been a disembodied voice, but you can now see Stephen's beautiful face. And I will say thank you, and I will be around for another few minutes if anybody wants to ask anything, either in the chat box or you want me to come back in at some point. But I'll stop talking now and hand over to Stephen. Stephen, we can't hear you. You're going to need to unmute your microphone.
Okay, there we go. So I was just thanking you. I'll now do that out loud and not only to myself. Thank you very much, Helen, for showing how you can use the Historiana environment to really promote historical thinking. I will just show some final features for questions that have been asked, which is how to share them once you have these learning resources, how to share them with students, and where the answers will be saved. So basically, once you've created a learning activity or you added it to My Historiana, then you can see that it turns actually pink. And here you can, you can edit them again, but you can also delete them. But more importantly, you can share them. And here the idea is that you can share them with students, you can share them with others. If you share them with others, basically people can create a copy of this. So if you're working together, we know there are some requests of people also to that you share the ownership and you want to perhaps work together on the same e-learning activity. That's not yet possible, but you should be able to share this with a colleague so that they can create a copy. If you want to share with a student, we figured out that once you put in a lot of effort in creating an e-learning activity, that you might want to use it with different classes. So that's why we have tags. So for example, if you have like class 4A, or you have class 4B, you can see it's very easy to add tags. So then you just click, okay, this time I want only this link for class B. That is important because in the end you want to be able to separate the answers from the different classes, and you don't want all the answers to appear just on one big heap. If you plan to use it also multiple years, okay, this is 2017, 2018. Let's already plan for next year. It's the same principle. So then you go to the next step and you get a shareable link. So we understood that not everybody is like working with email. Some people, they prefer to have to work on their own e-learning environment. So with these links, it's actually possible to use whatever platform you like. So once you've created those, then you can go back to My Shares, and there you can actually see the links. So at the moment you can see, okay, we had 4A in 2018, 2019. You can see the short link that is here. You can also, we made it easy to copy the link, and then it's in your cache, and you can just like click there to copy it. Because yeah, we also learned this through using, before we had this, you would actually follow the link. This is how it works if you then want to, you can imagine if you have shared many activities, now you can just see everything just from your class, just from this year. And this would, so it would work the same. So when students actually follow the activity, so forward now, actually go there, then they can just follow all the steps as you would do in as a student. So you really follow, you can provide all the annotations, etc. So the answers that in the end you will be giving, that is always related to the question box. We are always developing. In the end, we would like students to also see, for example, that you can, as a teacher, that you can review all the annotations that students make. And we're thinking about like a feedback button between that, so that you can actually communicate and inquire, why did you put this annotation, or are you sure, or did you consider this? But that is something for a later stage. That is perhaps also, like, I think a positive note to end on. We just received the news from the European Commission that we've got the funding to develop 3 more tools. We will do that with our community of history educators. And we're really looking for ideas and suggestions. The project will only start in October 2018, and it will again be with our web development team from WebTech and in partnership with Historiana. So we will continue with this group, but there are also some new partners. One of the features will be that it's also possible for partners to publish their own e-learning activities. That means that it will also be possible for partners to publish things in other languages than English. But it also means that we are going to have like several more building blocks. So at the moment, you've seen examples of the sorting, the prioritizing, the analyzing. There will be 3 more blocks, but of course we're looking for ideas because everything is always based on what you as history teachers would like. So if you have any suggestions, please share them in the chat. You can also, I will put my email here in the chat, so you can also send them to me directly. And for now, I would just like to thank you very much for participating. If there are any questions, I'm still happy to answer them. So please, yeah, can we apply it in sciences? I think if you find useful applications in science, yes, we made it for historians and history educators, but it is a tool that is free to use. It is so science teachers can definitely um, also use the e-activity builder to make your own applications. So it's very encouraging in a way to hear that it could also be used for other subjects as well. So from us, our perspective, there's no problem at all. Everybody can use it. So, and Helen, thank you very much for all your contributions. I see one more question about teachers of languages. Yes, teachers of languages. It's the same. So you can also use it. It's free for all to use. And then embed code for e-learning activities. I think it's a very good. At the moment, it's not there yet. We just have the shareable link, but I do think it's a very good idea. So if you have more of these ideas, please do send them to me. And thank you very much for participating. Asi, perhaps I can also thank you for hosting this event on European SchoolNet, and I would like to head back to you.
Hello, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Helen, for this very interesting webinar. And if you have any other questions, you can always contact us. We will be sharing this recording on YouTube this week, and we will be also sending you their certificates. But I would like to say many thanks to all the participants that joined. Many thanks for Stephen and Helen once again presenting. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming and staying with us. And hopefully we will have you again soon at eTwinning.